if you want to, or I can try and do it too, either way.
Okay, I'll go grab a notepad. I'll be right back. Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Jamie. Go ahead and.
Perfect.
And I am going to record. Mr. Braden asked if we could record the session, so I am recording. So if you prefer camera off, totally get it. But I am recording the session.
Thank you.
Hey Jen, can you let me screen share?
Yes. I gave it. Let me see if I can give it over to you. Then I'll give it back to Krista.
I think I have to do it.
I was going to say, Krista, yep. Can you do that?
Just did it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay.
It's still not letting me.
I wonder if I have.
Well, I can just give you a high level overview without seeing the actual numbers. We didn't really have many transactions, just we got our spirit wear check for the fall, which ended up, our profit was about $500. And then we just had some expenses come through for staff appreciation, which was the shirts that we buy for the new teachers, and then for the beginning of the year breakfast, and like the beginning of the year gift bags with some teacher supplies came through. And I think our balance is now like around $9,300 in the bank account.
Perfect. Very good. Thanks, Jamie. Anything else on the treasurer's report? Otherwise, that sounds great.
No, I think that was about it.
Perfect. Well, Krista, we'll hand it over to you. We asked Krista Carlisle just to talk a little bit about some of the grading information. I think a lot of us got our first reports, and so giving us a little bit of context and background on what all those things mean.
Yep. And if you want to make me host, I think Jennifer, Jamie, the reason it didn't work for you is because I think I made Jennifer the host, not you. So sorry about that. That's probably why you couldn't share your screen.
There we go. Are you okay?
Zoom problems. Yep, I'm good.
Awesome.
Okay. You should be able to see my screen now. I put together a couple of slides. First of all, thanks for having me. Krista Carlisle, I'm Director of Teaching and Learning, seventh year, in my seventh year in this role. Prior to that, I was in Des Moines for 9 years in the curriculum office at Central Academy and East High School. And I have an 8th grader who the 8th grade girls teams both won their inaugural games tonight. So go Jayhawks. That was fun to be there. I was telling Jen it felt normal. So that was really fun. So thank you for having me. Grading practices is an area that I have a lot of passion for. Even in Des Moines, prior to this role, I served on their task force to start their work down the road to more of what they call standards referenced grading. And as a parent, when Devin was in kindergarten, I had the opportunity to serve on the Urbandale Community School District Strategic Planning Committee as a parent. You know, it was one of those, Dr. Carranza, who was the principal at her school at the time, kind of sent out an all call, and me being an educator was like, ooh, pick me, I want to do this. And so I actually had the opportunity to engage with the district leadership at the time and several teachers on this very comprehensive strategic plan. And that was approved by the school board back in 2013. And I don't expect you to be able to read all of this, but this is a screenshot of the text that came right out of that strategic plan. One of the strategic actions to guarantee teaching all, reaching all, learning at high levels was to monitor and effectively communicate student learning. And I underlined just a couple of key points to this. So back in 2013, the district had said that they wanted to go down the road of developing a more standards-based reporting system. So we're all familiar with the traditional ABCD. A standards-based reporting system is what you received as parents with your report cards or progress reports that you just got. And I've got some screenshots that I'll walk through. The main point to all of this is that it breaks down each content or subject area into specific elements of learning that are intended to offer parents and teachers a more thorough description of progress toward proficiency. So Iowa was one of the last, in fact, the last state to adopt state standards, and that really came with the onset of No Child Left Behind. That started that movement. And then in 2011, I believe it was 10, 11. Nope, it was prior to that. Sorry. The Iowa Corps came along. And so up until that point, each district was required to set their own standards of learning. And so hence that local control that Iowa's pretty famous for. So along with standards-based teaching, standards-based reporting is kind of a natural progression into making sure that we're monitoring and effectively communicating student learning to all families. So this work really dates back quite a while, and it is still very much a work in progress. So, whoops, there we go. So this is a screenshot of a book. I actually have the book here. It's not a big book. It's a little book called A Repair Kit for Grading. It's by a man by the name of Ken O'Connor, who's become an expert in this. And we've had the opportunity to interact with him several times, both in large scale trainings, but also, via Zoom. In fact, he Zoomed with some of our high school teachers just about a year ago. This is a piece of work that our grading practices team studied before it was one of many things we studied before we started going down the road of making any shifts in grading practices. And really these 15 fixes, what Ken O'Connor asks teachers to do is ask themselves 2 essential questions about grades. And if I believe that picture is a live link, so when I'll share this PowerPoint with Jen so she can disseminate it and you can click on that. There's a high level summary of each of those 15 fixes. But basically 2 essential questions that all teachers should ask about grades is how confident am I that the grades students get in my class are accurate, meaningful, consistent, and that they support learning? And then number 2, how confident am I that the grades I assign to students accurately reflect those standards and those desired learning outcomes? And I started my teaching career in Ankeny, taught high school biology, AP biology, and anatomy physiology. And I can give you multiple examples of where my own grading practices didn't hit this mark. And back in, the late 90s, early 2000s, pre-standards, really it was, I remember there were 4 of us biology teachers and 2 of us had one system of grading and 2 of them, the other 2 had another system of grading. But yet after the kids, when they were seniors, all of those kids were walking across the stage as Ankeny High School graduates. So, after doing a lot of reflecting and a lot of learning, an experience in Mrs. Carlisle's class did not, equate to an experience in Mrs. Bing's class or Mrs. Sand's class or Miss Pilcher's class. And so the goal of all of this work is not to standardize teaching and learning, not at all. It's to make sure that what we're doing in classrooms meets the same level of rigor, the same level of expectation, because at the end of the day, all of our students are Jayhawks, and we're fortunate. Ankeny split now has 2 high schools, but we don't, we have 1. And we want to make sure that, that an experience in this teacher's class is equivalent, at least in terms of what students are learning and how they're demonstrating that learning to a student in this teacher's class. Now we know that there's an art to teaching, and so we don't want to take away the art to teaching, and each teacher has their own little methods and ways of engaging kids, but we want to make sure that teachers, when they're assessing their students, have the same level of expectation for those kiddos. So these 2 questions really are at the heart of these 15 fixes for grading practices. So we started with a task force, a committee of K-12 representation, teachers, administrators, to study things like 15 fixes and to study some of the literature out there. And ultimately, we decided that grades should be fair, accurate, specific, and timely. That FAST has several different acronyms or meanings in our district, but in this case, FAST refers to fair, accurate, specific, and timely. So we don't want outside noise influencing grades, things like participation points or attendance, even late work, which can be pretty controversial. And I'll get into a little bit, how we're trying to teach kids the habits that they'll carry with them long after, they graduate from high school. Because in college, we use that argument a lot, like, late work's not accepted in college. Yep, we totally get that. So we need to treat that now. But the way to treat it is not as 0. The punishment for not doing something should be do it, not to get a 0 and get that easy out. So ultimately, that's our goal, is to make sure that we're, you know, ensuring that grades are fair, accurate, specific, and timely, but also teaching kids those habits of mind that they'll need to be successful beyond Urbandale High School and Urbandale Middle School. So what the inroad that we made, or that the starting point, if you will, of all of this work for us was curriculum. Because if we, you know, that there's an old adage that clarity precedes competence. If we're not clear in what it is that we're trying to do, what it is we're trying to teach, what it is we want our kids to learn, then we're not going to be competent as educators in terms of what our assessments and things would look like. And we're certainly not going to be able to create that competence in students in terms of proficiency. So for us, it really started with some pretty in-depth work with teachers around the standards of the Iowa Core. So this is an example of 7th grade mathematics. We created what we call proficiency scales. And I have this little guy over here climbing a ladder, because essentially that's kind of how you can think of a proficiency scale. It's sort of like a learning ladder. So it looks like lots of words, and this is a document that's intended more for teacher use than it is for parent use, though these are, you know, available for parents as well. But what we asked teachers to do was take a look at the standards, and those standards are indicated up here at the top, right under where it says addition and subtraction. So you see 7.ns.a.1a, that's Iowa Core notation. So this particular topic of addition and subtraction, it's called a reporting topic, is comprised of 1, 2, 3, 4, it looks like 5 different standards that are related but not identical. So we clustered those standards together and talked about what is the foundational knowledge that students are going to need to know in order to be proficient. That's what you see down here in this score point of a 2. And I actually think I have some fancy little animations. Sorry, I forgot about that. Up here at a 3, what is it that is the learning goal? You know, what would be evidence or a description of students learning this, showing this, meeting this information at the level it's intended in the standards? That's a 3. A 2, as I mentioned, is the more foundational information. It means kids, you know, aren't quite there yet. And then up here at the top is this thing called a competency statement. So this has been a bit of an evolution for us too. We spent a ton of time with teachers analyzing, you know, breaking things down. What does it mean to be a 3? What does it mean to be a 2? And we were getting so far into the weeds in some cases, we were losing sight of sort of what's that big picture? What's the end goal? And it happened with our FCS teacher. We were working through 3s and 2s and defining this. And ultimately it was like, what do you want the kids to be able to do with all of this? Well, we want them to be able to sew, and I can't remember what the final thing was. Yes, that describes competency. So about a year and a half ago, we went back with teachers and added in these competency statements, because we didn't want people to get so caught up in the weeds that it was check, 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 check of all these things and lose track of ultimately what we want them to do. We want kids in this case to add and subtract rational numbers and solve real world problems with rational numbers. So this competency statement sitting up here at the top is sort of our checks and balances of, are we getting too far into the weeds, or are we really making sure that we're getting to this depth of knowledge, this level of understanding? So these proficiency scales are what teachers use to plan not only their assessments, how they're going to collect evidence, and that's what we have over here in the column on the right is evidence of learning, but also then their instruction, and in many cases their instructional sequence. Because in this case, in 7th grade math, these learning targets here down in the level 2 are taught before the kids get to the learning goal. So there's a sequence of instruction that's also implied in this. So in the math book, and these are 2 screenshot pages from our actual 7th grade math book. Without this level of understanding, without breaking all of this down in this way, it would be incredibly common for teachers to say, okay, your homework tonight is page 195 and page 197, go. And in fact, that's how many of us taught. early on in our careers. We had a textbook or a pacing guide, and we just followed it. And we assigned, does everybody remember 1 through 50 odd in math? Like, or maybe it was 1 through 50 even, because odd, the answers were in the back of the book. Like, that's how we've taught for a long, long time. And textbook publishers have gotten super savvy at, cramming absolutely everything into them, so they're attractive resources for the entire country. But with something like this in place, what it allows a teacher to do is take a look at these different practices and say, okay, what really is the most important? Maybe it all is. In this case, it might all be really, really important. But it allows teachers to really hone in on those skills and those practices and that content knowledge that students are going to need to be successful. So now, instead of looking like textbook pages, this is a screenshot of some planning under that same reporting topic of addition and subtraction that the teachers engaged in to plan enrichment. So I mentioned a few minutes ago, and I apologize, I'm jumping around here, that a learning target is at a level 3. That's the end of grade level, standard of learning. But in many cases, students' knowledge actually extends beyond that. And so, before, whereas in an older system, students, maybe just got 100% and that was good. That was, they knew everything, great, But if it was all at this score of a 3, that didn't really tell us about what they could do if we didn't put, sort of a ceiling on them. So this work has really forced our teachers to think through, what does quality enrichment look like? Now, in this example of addition and subtraction, for this particular learning target, you can see that the teacher said students aren't going to have an opportunity to score a 4 for this learning target, because really, state an example of combining opposites equal to 0 that's it. Like, there's really nothing beyond that. However, when we talk about show the distance between two numbers is the absolute value of their difference, and in a real world context, the teachers came up with a couple of different examples to enrich students. So therefore, if I'm already achieving at that level 3, I've already got this grade level standard, now I've got a bank of potential enrichments that I can assign to students to push their thinking beyond that level 3. And I can honestly say, as a teacher, most of us had never really thought about this before, and thought about really targeted, aligned ways to push kids' thinking. And this is very, very, very much a work in progress. Teachers are still coming up with these examples and still creating these ideas. And I think that's going to be a never-ending process as we build that bank of evidence of learning. Really, this gets me to, I think, one of the most important takeaways about this grading system, and that is this idea of on target versus on topic. There's so much to know in the world today. Information multiplies at an exponential rate, and with Google and other tools at our fingertips, some of the learning that we did as kids, kids can get access to in the blink of an eye. Conceptual understanding is really important for these kids, being critical consumers of information so they can kind of sift through fact versus fiction, credible versus not credible, that type of thing. And so we don't have a lot of time for maybe things that were on topic. I taught biology. I could make a lot of things fit under the umbrella of biology, but just because I really loved the hot zone and emerging viruses and Ebola doesn't mean that my kids needed to spend a lot of time on that. Because really that wasn't the point. It was interesting, it was cool. The Outbreak was a neat movie, it was exciting, but if I had it to go back and do over again, there's a lot of things I could have eliminated to get to the heart of the matter and make sure that really we're hitting that target right there in the bullseye. And that's what all that curriculum work really has allowed us to do, is help teachers sort of sift through what all of that is and make sure that our teaching and our assessments are about really that bullseye. So that progress report is really the communication piece. And this is how we're communicating learning. So you all just recently got the first quintile progress report. And this is an example of one in literacy. If you see an NA, all that means is it wasn't assessed during that quintile. And so another thing that our teachers have done is they've scoped out the curriculum and figured out, okay, in quintile 1, these are the things we focus on. In quintile 2, these are the things we focus on, et cetera. When all of this was happening, we originally intended to maintain letter grades. And it was middle school teachers who really, as they came to understand the system, pushed back and said, you know, we're just not really feeling too great about that because these are all year-end standards. And so how do we aggregate this information in the first quintile, for example, into a letter grade if we really haven't taught to the top of the ladder yet? You know, kids are just starting in the writing process, for example. We don't expect them to be at a 3 yet because it's still very much in practice. And so that's why we've done away with letter grades. That is not the plan for the high school. Let me just be very, very clear. As we move toward a system like this at the high school, we will maintain letter grades for lots of reasons. High school classes are on a semester system versus a year-long system. So it's a little easier to aggregate those things into letters. Plus there's just, you know, so many things that still ride on letter grades at the high school level, you know, scholarships, car insurance discounts, you know, you name it. There's lots of things that letter grades are really, really important for. So as we move into this system, that piece will be maintained. The other piece that was new in this system is this idea of building a better you. So building a better you are those work habits and those interactions with peers and adults, those soft skills, if you will, that are actually really critically important skills that up until now, we didn't really take the time to set aside and measure independently. Now we're doing that. So you're seeing not only this academic information up here for each of your child's classes, you're seeing their work habits and their responsibility for learning and things like that for each of their classes as well, which is another point of communication for families. At the beginning or at the front page of your progress report, which went from 1 page to I think 4 or 5 now, is this generic academic performance scale. So I showed you a few minutes ago what it looks like for a specific reporting topic in math. This is more of a generic explanation of what a 2 is. When we say a 2 or approaching a grade level standard, this gives us some language to tell you what that means. Or when we say that there are 3 and they're meeting a grade level standard, this gives some language. I think one of the biggest differences between this and the old system is instead of, you know, if a student doesn't do something, instead of giving a 0, we give an incomplete. And we say, we got to have that information. We can't give you a grade on something we don't have. But to say that it's a 0 is also not accurate, because a 0 in this case means the kiddo tried and they can't do any of it, which is going to be really, really, really rare. So at the end of the day, whoops, I'm going to stop sharing now. That's sort of our system in a nutshell. I would say it's very much a work in progress and very much a learning process for both our teachers and our students. And I'd be happy to take any questions that anybody has.
Awesome. Well, any questions for Ms. Carlisle? I'm interested if there was something, now that you've got a system set up, what do you think is still the next opportunity? You know, something that maybe you didn't anticipate that in the next moderation or the next model or iteration you would improve?
I think it's enrichment. For sure. You know, we have, I use 7th grade math because they were such a mature professional learning community. The 2 teachers that developed this had been teaching together for quite some time. Math had been in the same standard. Math has been using those standards since I believe 2 years before I started in this position. So this would be year 9. So there wasn't a huge learning curve for math in terms of the standards that they were using, like there were for social studies. The social studies standards are brand new this year. So they had a lot of time to work on enrichment opportunities in their system. And I just, as a teacher, I think we have been told to differentiate for students, but without that clarity around what differentiation actually looks like, that becomes really, really challenging. So to be able to have a system like that, where you've already got a whole slew of enrichment opportunities aligned to the standards that you're teaching, I think just makes our ability to differentiate for our highest learners all that much better. I would say the highest learners are typically the ones, the students that do school very well, are typically the ones that struggle to adjust to this system the most. And I think it's because of a lack of enrichment.
Perfect. I think that's really interesting. And I've always read them on the, read the one pager you've shared, but this gives it kind of a whole new level of context. So what other questions? Any other questions from the group?
A quick question. And I know, Krista, you and I have emailed back and forth a few times about this particular subject. So, so is it my understanding at the middle school level? So if there's a topic, like on that sheet you showed, if, quintile 1, the score is a 2, if they move throughout the year to a 3, their final grade is a 3 in that topic. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah. And that will be consistent with high school as well. And that's part of the reason, Melissa, why our teachers did not feel comfortable giving kids letter grades, because quintile 1 is 7 weeks into the school year. For some of these year-long topics, they would only expect kids to be at a 2 or a 2.5. And so slapping a letter grade on there that said you're at a B or a C or something just didn't feel right to teachers, because it's really where they end. It's where they end, what they've learned at the end that would be their final. And so in high school, when we do have letter grades, really nothing counts. That letter grade doesn't really mean anything until the end of that semester.
Okay.
And that would be the grade then that goes on the report card, gets calculated in the GPA and all of that. So it's where they end, not where they start.
So they would have, it's for those higher learners then, if they got to a 3 mid-semester, then they would have the rest of the semester to do enrichment to get above the 3. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay.
Ultimately, that's exactly what we need to work towards. I don't think we're there yet. I think we have a lot of work to do in enrichment. But yes, that's absolutely correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
Other questions? Perfect. Well, thank you very much. That was really, I thought, insightful, and I learned a lot about it. So I think we just have 2 last topics. Melissa, do you want to give an update on some of our thoughts around the conference lunch ideas? And then we'll hit teacher wish lists as well.
Yeah. So as many of you have probably seen, we've sent out in the PTO newsletter or email newsletter that we are collecting donations for conference dinners. In the past, we've typically had people sign up to bring different meal items to the middle school and set up a buffet style for the teachers to eat at during their conferences. But of course, with COVID, things are a little different this year. So what we are planning on doing is providing a lunch for all teachers and staff at UMS on the Wednesday between conferences. And we're in the process of contacting different companies that do offer box lunch type deals where teachers can just come down and grab their lunch and then go take it wherever they want to eat and be socially distanced or socially distanced, however they want to do it. So we're working on that. And so far response has been fantastic from parents. So that's really encouraging to see. And we're looking forward to being able to do that for the teachers next week. So
I think we also have kind of anecdotally heard that it's been a long haul to be a teacher this year. So I think our thought was anything we can do to just show them our appreciation for everything that they've been doing throughout the year and the rest of the semester, we'd love to do. So
yes.
perfect.
And did you want me to speak to the wish list too?
Yeah. Do you want to, or I can, whatever. You want to?
The next thing we're going to try and tackle, of course, depending on what ends up happening this month, because it sounds like it's going to be a crazy month, is we're going to try to, normally around Thanksgiving or shortly thereafter, we publish a list. We go to teachers before that and ask them to give us 5 things that they would like for their classrooms. And then we put together a list and we send that out to the school, and families have an opportunity to select 1 or more items from various teachers to purchase and then bring to the school as part of like their holiday shopping. So we kind of loop it into holiday shopping. It's a way for families to help teachers, but also if they want to do like a gift for Christmas, but really not do a gift, it's kind of a way to support the teachers that way. So it actually went over really well last year. We had a really good response. And so we're planning to do it again. And I think we're going to start, I think maybe next week is that what we said, guys, trying to reach out to teachers and see what their needs are. And then sometime probably right before Thanksgiving, we'll get a list compiled and sent out to all of the families at UMS, and then they'll have the opportunity to select items to purchase and then bring them to the school. I think usually we did about a week before winter break, I think last year. So
we've heard things like Kleenexes are in high need of this year, and just supplies that you maybe would typically share, go to a supply closet for, they don't have as much access to. So I'm sure that'll be very much appreciated as we go into the winter. So
yes, and we are working on getting Kleenexes right now. I'm still calling around to see who can actually get us 200 boxes of Kleenex. So I'm not sure. Once we can find someone to do it, I'm hoping maybe they can deliver. Otherwise, Jamie and Jen.
Minivans, yeah.
Yeah, we're going to be loading up, soliciting some big vehicles for help. So
right. We started halfway through realizing that it may be even a problem to find like the amount of Kleenexes that we needed, not just like purchasing them, but finding them. So thank you for all your work, Melissa, on hunting those down, and lunches too.
Yeah.
Good. Well, any other questions or any other open things that anybody wanted to discuss tonight? Very good. Otherwise, we can close the meeting. So again, Ms. Carlisle, thank you so much for sharing some about the grading rubric. We really appreciate it and some of the background on it. But if you guys have anything, feel free to send us a message or email us and let us know. So thank you, guys.
Thank you all. Thanks for the opportunity, and thanks for the work you do. It's awesome.
Thank you.